The crystal cities of Kepler 442b had stood for over 10,000 years, their spires reaching toward twin suns that painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. The Zephyrians who built them were beings of living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting light in patterns that served as their language. They had never known war, never felt the need for weapons or armies. Their world was one of harmony, where conflicts were settled through shared consciousness and gentle debate. Elder Vex Halon stood at the highest point of the capital city, watching the morning light dance through the crystal formations that his ancestors had grown from the planet's core. The old Zephyrian had lived for 3 centuries, guiding his people through times of growth and discovery. Today felt different, though. A strange tension filled the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. The first ships appeared as dots against the amber sky. Vex Halon's crystalline form hummed with concern as more vessels materialized from hyperspace. These were not the gentle exploration craft that occasionally visited their world. These ships were dark, angular things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with purpose, like predators closing in on prey. The Krillian Empire had found them. Within hours, the invasion began. Plasma fire rained down from the alien vessels, shattering crystal spires that had taken centuries to grow. The Zephyrians had no weapons to fight back with, no armies to defend themselves. They could only watch in horror as their beautiful world burned around them. The Krillians were insectoid creatures, tall and thin with chitinous armor and compound eyes that reflected no mercy. They moved through the crystal cities like a plague, herding the peaceful Zephyrians into containment areas. Those who resisted were cut down without hesitation. The survivors were forced to watch as their homes were destroyed and their children taken as slaves. Vex Halon barely escaped the initial assault, fleeing deep into the crystal caves beneath the capital. Around him, other survivors huddled in the darkness, their light forms dimmed with grief and terror. The elder knew that without help, his people would not survive another weak dot in desperation. He made his way to the ancient communication array hidden in the deepest caves. This device had been built by his ancestors to reach across the galaxy, though it had never been used for anything more than peaceful exploration. Now it would carry their final message to the stars. With trembling hands of crystal, Vex Halon activated the transmitter. The message he broadcast was simple, but filled with the anguish of a dying race. We are the Zephyrians of Kepler 442b. Our world burns, our people die. If any civilization in the galaxy values peace and life, please help us. We have nothing to offer but our gratitude and the promise that we will remember your kindness for all time. The signal traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying with it the hopes of an entire species. 3 months later, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was finishing his night shift at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station when the alien transmission reached his equipment. Morrison was a veteran of 20 years in Earth's Space Defense Corps, a man who had seen humanity rise from a single world to become a major power in the galaxy. He had translated hundreds of alien communications, most of them routine trade requests or exploration reports. This message was different. Morrison played the transmission 3 times before he fully understood what he was hearing. The pain in the alien voice was universal, cutting through the barriers of language and species. Someone was dying out there, and they were asking for help. Without hesitation, Morrison activated the priority communication link to Earth Defense Command. Admiral Lisa Hayes answered on the first ring, despite the early hour. She was a woman who had earned her position through merit and determination, leading humanity's forces through the difficult years as Earth established itself among the galactic community. Admiral, you need to hear this, Morrison said, his voice tight with emotion. He transmitted the alien message, watching Hayes' face grow grim as she listened. How old is this transmission? Hayes asked. 3 months, given the distance from the source system? Admiral, if these people are still alive, they won't be for much longer. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying the star charts that showed the location of Kepler 442b. It was far from Earth, well outside humanity's normal sphere of influence. Getting there would require significant resources and would leave Earth's own defenses stretched thin. Send this to the United Earth Council immediately, Hayes ordered. Emergency session in 2 hours. The council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from Hans, Earth's major nations and colonies, gathered to hear the alien plea. The message played in the silent room, its desperate tone making even the most hardened diplomats shift uncomfortably. In their seats, Counselor Greg Baker from the North American Federation spoke first. We have to consider our own security. Earth's military forces are already committed across 3 different sectors. We can't afford to stretch ourselves any. Thinner, Counselor Maria Santos from the South American Alliance stood up, her eyes flashing with anger. So we just ignore them? Let an entire species die because it's inconvenient? It's not about convenience, Baker replied. It's about responsibility to our own people first. Our responsibility is to use our strength to protect those who can't. Protect themselves, Santos shot back. That's what separates us from the monsters who prey on the weak. The debate continued for an hour, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity had not fought its way off a death world and earned respect among the stars just to turn away from those in need. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. Admiral Hayes received the authorization with grim satisfaction. Within minutes, she was activating Protocol 7, the deployment of humanity's most elite military unit. The Terran Expeditionary Force would answer the Zephyrians' call for help dot as communication signals raced across Earth's military networks. Hayes stood at her office window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien species was fighting for survival against impossible odds. They had reached out across the void, trusting that someone would hear their plea and care enough to help. They had reached the right species. Earth's children were coming, and they would not come alone. The Deathworlders were about to remind the galaxy why humanity had earned its fearsome reputation among the stars. More importantly, they would show that strength without compassion was meaningless, and that the greatest weapon any species could possess was the willingness to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. The message from Kepler 442b had reached Earth, and Earth would answer. Captain Ryan Cross was mending fence on his family's ranch in Montana when his communication device buzzed with the emergency code he had hoped never to hear again. The summer sun beat down on his shoulders as he straightened up, already knowing that his peaceful morning was about to end. Protocol 7 meant only one thing. Somewhere in the galaxy, people needed help, and the Terran Expeditionary Force was being called to action. Cross had spent 15 years in the Marines, earning his reputation in conflicts across 3 different star systems. He was known for 2 things: his ability to adapt to any battlefield situation and his absolute refusal to abandon civilians in danger. These qualities had made him the natural choice to lead humanity's most elite unit, the soldiers that other species had nicknamed the Deathworlders. I have to go, he told his wife Sarah as he gathered his gear. She nodded, understanding written across her face. She had been a military spouse long enough to know that some calls could not be ignored. Bring them home safe, she said, kissing him goodbye. All of them, Cross promised, meaning both his team and whoever they were going to help. The flight to Luna Base took 3 hours, giving Cross time to read the mission briefing that Admiral Hayes had transmitted to his personal device. The details were sparse but chilling. An entire alien species was facing extinction at the hands of a militaristic empire. The Zephyrians had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. They were counting on Earth to save them. Luna Base was already buzzing with activity when Cross arrived. The Terran Expeditionary Force maintained a small but highly trained roster, and every member was being recalled from leave or rotation. Cross found his team assembling in the main briefing room, their faces grim as they absorbed the details of their new mission. Sergeant First Class Amy Chun was the first to greet him. The demolitions expert had joined the unit after her hometown was attacked by raiders 3 years earlier. She had lost her entire family in that attack, and since then had dedicated herself to ensuring that no one else would suffer the same fate. Chun was small in stature, but possessed a fierce determination that made her one of the most effective soldiers Cross had ever served with. "Sir, the intel on these Krillians is limited, but what we have isn't encouraging," Chun reported. "They're a conquest species. They take worlds by overwhelming force and enslave or eliminate the local population." Corporal Ben Jackson looked up from the tactical display he was studying. The sniper had grown up hunting in the forests of Oregon before joining the military, and his patience and precision had saved countless lives during the Proxima conflict. The good news is they seem to rely on brute force tactics. No finesse, no subtlety. They just throw everything they have at a target until it breaks. "That might work against peaceful species," said Staff Sergeant John Davis, checking the power cells on his heavy weapons rig. The big man from Texas had earned his reputation holding defensive positions against impossible odds. But they've never faced humans before. Specialist Katie Rodriguez was reviewing medical data on Zephyrian physiology. The combat medic had saved more lives than any other member of the unit, often under enemy fire. Her ability to adapt medical procedures to alien biology had made her invaluable during first contact situations. "These people are basically living crystal," she explained. "Their biology is completely different from anything we've encountered before. I'll need to improvise treatment methods in the field." Technical Sergeant Alex Turner was already working on communication protocols. The electronics specialist could hack alien computer systems faster than most people could tie their shoes, and his ability to establish secure communications had turned the tide in several operations. "I'm working on translation algorithms for their language. It's based on light patterns and harmonic frequencies. Complex, but I should be able to crack it." Cross studied his team with satisfaction. Each of them was the best at what they did, but more importantly, they shared his commitment to protecting the innocent. They had volunteered for the Terran Expeditionary Force, knowing that they would be sent into the galaxy's most dangerous situations, often to help people they had never met. Admiral Hayes entered the briefing room, followed by Dr. Helen White, Earth's leading xenobiologist. The doctor had worked with the team before, providing crucial insights into alien psychology and culture during first contact situations. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," Hayes began without preamble. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive orbital bombardment of the Zephyrian homeworld. The Krillians aren't just conquering the planet. They're systematically destroying the infrastructure that took the Zephyrians millennia to build." Dr. White activated a holographic display showing images of the Zephyrian homeworld before and after the invasion. The contrast was heartbreaking. Beautiful crystal cities had been reduced to rubble, and the planet's surface was scarred with burn marks from orbital weapons. "The Zephyrians evolved on a world without natural predators," White explained. "They have no concept of warfare or violence. Their entire society is built around cooperation and shared consciousness. The psychological trauma of this invasion may be as devastating as the physical damage." Chun's jaw tightened as she studied the images. "How many survivors are we talking about?" "Our best estimates suggest that 90% of the population has been either killed or enslaved," Hayes replied. "The remaining 10% are hiding in underground caverns, but they won't last much longer without outside help. Jackson leaned forward. What about the Krillian forces? Numbers, weapons, deployment patterns? They have a fleet of 12 capital ships in orbit, plus ground forces scattered across the planet's major population centers, Hayes said. Standard Krillian doctrine calls for overwhelming force, followed by systematic strip mining of resources. They're treating this as a routine conquest operation. That's their mistake, Cross said quietly. They're expecting another easy victory against a defenseless species. They're not prepared for humans. Turner looked up from his tablet. Sir, I've been studying Krillian communication protocols. Their command structure is highly centralized. If we can disrupt their communications network, we can turn their superior numbers against them. Davis nodded approvingly. Create confusion in their ranks, and hit them hard while they're trying to figure out what's happening. Rodriguez had been quiet during the briefing, but now she spoke up. Sir, what about the Zephyrian survivors? They're going to be terrified of us initially. We need to be careful about how we make first contact. Dr. White nodded. She's right. To the Zephyrians, humans will appear to be another predator species. Our bone density, muscle mass, and forward-facing eyes all mark us as evolved hunters. They may run from us initially. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Cross decided. Our primary objective is to eliminate the Krillian threat. Everything else is secondary. The team spent the next 6 hours preparing for deployment. The expedition ship, USS Valiant, was loaded with weapons, medical supplies, and humanitarian aid. Captain Steve Martinez, a veteran of the Proxima conflict, would command the vessel during the 3-week journey to Kepler-442b. As the team made final preparations, Cross found himself thinking about the message that had started it all. Somewhere across the galaxy, the survivors of an ancient and peaceful species were hiding in caves, waiting for help that might never come. They had broadcast their plea into the void, trusting that someone would hear and care enough to respond. They had reached the right species. Cross looked at his team one final time before boarding the Valiant. Chun was double-checking her demolition charges. Jackson was calibrating his rifle's targeting system. Davis was running diagnostics on his heavy weapons. Rodriguez was organizing her medical supplies. And Turner was testing his communication equipment. They were ready. The USS Valiant lifted off from Luna Base, 12 hours after the emergency session of the United Earth Council. As Earth fell away behind them, Cross felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His team was depending on him to bring them home safely. The Zephyrians were depending on him to save their species from extinction. He would not let either group down. The Deathworlders were coming, and the Krillian Empire was about to learn why humanity had earned its fearsome reputation among the stars. The USS Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler-442 system, its stealth systems immediately engaging to avoid detection. Captain Martinez brought the ship to a halt behind a large asteroid, using its bulk to mask their presence, while the crew conducted their initial reconnaissance of the system. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Zephyrian homeworld hung in space like a wounded animal, its once beautiful crystal cities reduced to smoking ruins. Massive Krillian dreadnoughts orbited the planet in a predatory formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had rained death upon the defenseless world below. Smaller vessels moved between the capital ships and the planet's surface, like worker ants, ferrying stolen resources and captured prisoners. Cross stood on the bridge beside Captain Martinez, studying the tactical display with growing anger. The scale of destruction was staggering. Entire continents showed the scars of orbital bombardment, and what had once been forests of living crystal were now fields of shattered glass. 12 capital ships, just like the intelligence report said, Martinez observed, plus about 30 smaller vessels, standard Krillian conquest fleet. Sergeant Shun joined them at the display, her face grim as she analyzed the enemy positions. They're not even trying to be subtle about it. Look at those bombardment patterns. They're deliberately targeting civilian areas. Turner was monitoring Krillian communications from his station, his translation software working to decode the alien transmissions. "Sir, you need to hear this," he said, routing the audio to the bridge speakers. The Krillian voices were harsh and guttural, speaking in clipped military tones about quotas and schedules. Turner's translation software converted their words into English, revealing the cold bureaucracy of genocide. Sector 7 reports mining quota exceeded by 12%. Slave labor efficiency remains high. Resistance pocket eliminated in Grid 45. No survivors. Transport 7 ready for departure, with full cargo of processed materials and biological specimens. Cross felt his hands clench into fists. The Krillians were discussing the destruction of an entire civilization with the same tone they might use to discuss shipping schedules. To them, the Zephyrians were nothing more than resources to be harvested. "Sir," Jackson called from the sensor station, "I'm picking up faint energy signatures from the planet's southern continent. Could be survivors hiding in the crystal cave networks." Rodriguez looked up from her medical station. "If there are survivors down there, they're going to need help soon. The atmospheric readings show significant contamination from the orbital bombardment." Cross made his decision. "Martinez, take us closer to the planet. Use the debris field from the destroyed orbital stations as cover. We need to make contact with any survivors and assess the situation on the ground." The Valiant moved carefully through the wreckage that orbited Kepler 442b, the twisted remains of what had once been beautiful space habitats built by the Zephyrians. Martinez's piloting skills kept them hidden among the debris, avoiding the sensor sweeps of the patrolling Krillian vessels dot as they approached the planet's surface. The true horror of the invasion became clear. The crystal cities that had taken millennia to grow were nothing but rubble now. The Krillians had strip-mined entire regions, leaving behind poisoned wastelands where nothing could grow. "There," Jackson said, pointing to a faint energy reading on his display. "Cave system in the Meridian mountain range. Definitely artificial construction, and I'm reading life signs." Turner worked to establish contact with the survivors, broadcasting on multiple frequencies using the translation protocols Dr. White had provided. For long minutes there was only silence. Then hesitant response came through the speakers. The voice was faint and filled with fear, speaking in the harmonic tones that served as the Zephyrian language. Turner's equipment struggled to translate the complex light-based communication into sound, but the meaning came through clearly enough. "Who are you? Are you more slavers? Please, we have nothing left to take." Turner responded carefully, using phrases that Dr. White had taught them. "We are humans from the world called Earth. We received your message. We came to help." The silence that followed stretched for nearly 5 minutes. When the Zephyrian voice returned, it was filled with disbelief and desperate hope. "You came? Someone actually came?" Cross took the microphone from Turner. "We're here, and we're going to help you. Can you guide us to your location? We need to meet in person to coordinate rescue operations." The Zephyrian, who identified himself as Elder Nixtellen, provided coordinates for a cave entrance that was hidden from Krillian patrols. Cross assembled his team for immediate deployment, leaving the Valiant hidden in the debris field with orders to monitor Krillian fleet movements. The shuttle descent through the planet's atmosphere was a sobering experience. From orbit, the destruction had been abstract, just data on a screen. Up close, it was devastating. They flew over crystal formations that had been home to millions of beings, now reduced to fields of broken glass. Krillian mining equipment carved deep wounds in the planet's surface. extracting resources with no thought for the environmental damage they caused. Chon watched the devastation pass below them with growing fury. How can any species do this to another? The Zephyrians never hurt anyone. Because they could, Cross replied grimly. The Krillians see strength as the only thing that matters. To them, the Zephyrians' peaceful nature made them weak and deserving of conquest. The cave entrance was hidden behind a waterfall that had been polluted by Krillian mining operations. Davis secured the landing zone while Rodriguez and Turner set up the portable medical station they had brought with them. Cross and Shun advanced into the cave system, following the coordinates that Elder Nix Tullen had provided. The first meeting between humans and Zephyrians was tense and emotional. Elder Nix Tullen was ancient even by his species' standards, his crystalline form dimmed by grief and exhaustion. Around him, dozens of survivors huddled in the darkness, their light forms barely visible in the gloom. When Nix Tullen first saw Cross and Shun, he recoiled instinctively. The humans were clearly predators, their dense bone structure and forward-facing eyes marking them as evolved hunters from a dangerous world. Everything about them screamed apex predator to a species that had never known violence. Shun slowly removed her helmet, showing her face to the frightened aliens. "We're not here to hurt you," she said softly, her voice carried by Turner's translation device. "We came because you asked for help." The simple statement broke through Nix Tullen's fear. Here were beings who could clearly destroy his people with ease, but instead they had traveled across the galaxy to help them. The old Zephyrian began to weep, his crystalline tears creating tiny rainbows in the cave's dim light. 3 months, he whispered. 3 months since we sent that message. We thought no one would come. We thought we were alone. Rodriguez entered the cave with her medical equipment, immediately beginning to treat injured Zephyrians, whose crystal structures had been damaged by Krillian weapons. Her gentle touch and obvious medical skill helped to ease the survivors' fear of the strange predatory beings who had come to help them. Over the next several hours, Elder Nix Tullen shared the full horror of the past months. The Krillians had arrived without warning, overwhelming the peaceful Zephyrians through sheer brutality. They had enslaved 90% of the population, using them as forced labor in the strip mining operations that were destroying the planet's ecosystem. "They use our children as shields," Nix Tullen explained, his voice breaking. "They know we will not fight back if it might harm our young ones. They exploit our nature against us." Turner established a secure communication network between the cave hideouts, revealing that there were several thousand Zephyrians still alive in various locations across the planet. They shared detailed intelligence about Krillian positions, patrol routes, and the locations of the prison camps where their people were being held. Cross studied the tactical situation with his team, formulating a plan that could eliminate the Krillian threat while minimizing casualties among the Zephyrian prisoners. The enemy relied on overwhelming force and intimidation, but they had never faced an opponent that combined human tactical innovation with genuine concern for civilian casualties. "The Krillians have made one critical mistake," Cross told his team as they prepared for the coming battle. "They think strength means being willing to hurt the innocent. They're about to learn what real strength looks like." Elder Nix Tullen watched the humans prepare their weapons and equipment with amazement. These beings from the Deathworld called Earth possessed technology and tactics beyond anything the Zephyrians had ever imagined. But what impressed him most was their obvious dedication to protecting his people. As night fell over the ruined crystal cities, the Terran Expeditionary Force made final preparations for their assault on the Krillian occupation forces. The odds were heavily against them, but they had faced impossible situations before. The Deathworlders were ready to remind the galaxy why humanity had earned its fearsome reputation among the stars. The attack began at dawn, when the planet's twin suns cast long shadows across the ruined crystal cities. Captain Martinez brought the USS Valiant out of hiding, decloaking directly above the largest Krillian dreadnought in a maneuver that violated every rule of space combat. The enemy vessel's shields were down for routine maintenance, and Martinez took full advantage of the opportunity. The Valiant's plasma cannons opened fire at point-blank range, punching through the dreadnought's hull before the Krillians could react. Secondary explosions rippled across the alien ship as its ammunition stores detonated, turning the massive vessel into a burning wreck in a matter of seconds. The Krillian response was immediate and furious. The remaining 11 capital ships began converging on the human vessel, their weapons charging for a coordinated strike that would vaporize the smaller ship. But Cross and his team were already in motion, having deployed in stealth shuttles while the Valiant drew enemy attention. Chun and Jackson hit the main Krillian command post on the planet's surface just as the orbital battle began. The facility was heavily fortified, but the Krillians had designed their defenses to repel frontal assaults by conventional forces. They were not prepared for humans who approached warfare like a deadly art form. Jackson positioned himself on a ridge 3 kilometers from the command post, his rifle equipped with experimental ammunition designed to penetrate Krillian armor. His first shot took out the primary communications array, severing the link between ground forces and the orbital fleet. His second shot eliminated the facility's commanding officer through a window that should have been impossible to reach from his position. Chun moved through the base's perimeter like a ghost, placing explosive charges with surgical precision. Her demolitions training had taught her to think in 3 dimensions, and she used the Krillians' own architecture against them. When her charges detonated simultaneously, they brought down key structural supports and trapped half the garrison in the lower levels. The Krillian soldiers, who survived the initial assault, found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their experience. These humans moved with predatory grace, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before return fire could be coordinated. Every shot they fired found its target. Every explosive they placed caused maximum damage. Meanwhile, Rodriguez and Turner were working with Elder Nix Tellin to evacuate Zephyrian civilians from the nearest prison camp. The facility held over 3,000 prisoners, including many children who had been separated from their families during the initial invasion. Rodriguez's medical training proved invaluable as she treated Zephyrians whose crystal structures had been cracked by Krillian weapons or damaged by forced labor. Her gentle touch and obvious concern for their welfare helped to calm the terrified prisoners, many of whom had never seen an alien species before the invasion. Turner used his electronic warfare skills to hack into the prison camp's security systems, turning the Krillians' own technology against them. Door locks opened to free prisoners, while security cameras showed false images to confuse the guards. When Krillian reinforcements tried to respond to the breakout, they found their vehicles disabled by mysteriously malfunctioning computer systems. Most dramatic moment of the battle came when Staff Sergeant Davis found himself surrounded by an entire Krillian battalion while protecting a group of Zephyrian children. The enemy had tracked his position and deployed overwhelming force to crush what they assumed was a single human soldier. Davis had been setting up a defensive position in the ruins of what had once been a Zephyrian school when the children stumbled into his location, fleeing from Krillian slave hunters. The big Texan took one look at the frightened youngsters and made his decision without hesitation. "Stay behind me, kids," he said, even though they could not understand his words. His tone and body language communicated his intent clearly enough. Krillian battalion advanced with typical arrogance, expecting to overwhelm a single human through sheer numbers. They had heard rumors about the effectiveness of human soldiers, but they had not fought them personally. They were about to receive a harsh education. Davis opened fire with his heavy plasma cannon, the weapon's distinctive whine echoing across the ruins as it carved through Krillian battle armor like paper. His tactical training took over, and he began moving through the rubble with deadly efficiency, using cover and concealment to multiply his effectiveness. When his primary weapon overheated, Davis picked up fallen Krillian weapons and continued fighting. When those ran out of ammunition, he resorted to grenades and improvised explosives. When those were exhausted, he drew his sidearm and continued the battle at close range. The Krillians had never faced anything like this. In their experience, soldiers either fought from prepared positions or retreated when overwhelmed. Davis did neither, instead adapting to each new challenge with calm professionalism. Every move he made was calculated to protect the children behind him, while eliminating as many enemies as possible. For 3 hours, the battle raged around the ruined school. Krillian reinforcements poured into the area, but Davis held his ground, his position marked by the growing pile of enemy casualties. The alien soldiers began to whisper among themselves about the impossible human who would not die, who fought like a creature from their darkest myths. A turning point came when Turner successfully hacked into the Krillian fleet's central computer system. The young technical sergeant had been working for hours to penetrate their security protocols, using techniques that Earth's cybersecurity experts had developed during the early days of galactic contact. "Got them," Turner announced over the communication network. "I'm in their main battle computer." What followed was a masterpiece of electronic warfare. Turner turned the Krillians' own weapons against them, causing their targeting systems to lock onto friendly vessels. Suddenly, the alien fleet was firing on itself, their superior numbers becoming a liability as confusion spread through their ranks. Captain Martinez took advantage of the chaos, using the Valiant's superior maneuverability to strike at damaged enemy vessels. The human ship darted between the much larger Krillian dreadnoughts like a predator hunting among wounded prey, its weapons finding critical systems that the aliens had left. And the EFENDED. Coordinated the final assault on the Krillian ground. Commander's Fortress, bringing together intelligence gathered by all his team members. The fortress was supposedly impregnable, protected by energy shields and automated defense systems. But the humans had identified a weakness that the Krillians themselves had not considered. The attack came from below, through the ancient crystal cave networks that the Zephyrians had used to hide from the invaders. Chun's explosives brought down the fortress's foundation, while Jackson's precision fire eliminated key defensive positions. Rodriguez and Turner led rescued Zephyrian prisoners in a diversionary attack that drew enemy forces away from the main assault dot. When Cross finally confronted the Krillian commander, the alien officer could barely comprehend what had happened. His superior fleet was in ruins, his ground forces were scattered and demoralized, and his supposedly impregnable fortress had fallen to a handful of soldiers from an unknown world. "What are you?" the Krillian demanded, his compound eyes reflecting fear for the first time in his military career. "We're humans," Cross replied simply. "And you made the mistake of hurting people we came to protect." The battle for Kepler 442b ended when the surviving Krillian vessels fled the system rather than face further destruction. Their ground forces, cut off from orbital support and facing an enemy they could not understand, surrendered in growing numbers throughout the day. Elder Nix Tellon stood among the ruins of his world's capital city, watching Krillian prisoners being processed by human soldiers who treated them with more mercy than they had shown to innocent Zephyrians. Around him, his people emerged from hiding for the first time in months, their crystal forms beginning to shine with renewed hope. The impossible had happened. The Deathworlders had come, and they had kept their promise. The liberation of Kepler 442b was complete, but the real work was just beginning. A world lay in ruins. A people faced an uncertain future, and the humans who had saved them were preparing to help rebuild what had been destroyed. The real work began in the days following the Krillian retreat. Captain Cross stood on a hill, overlooking the ruins of the Zephyrian capital, watching as his team worked alongside the survivors to begin the massive task of rebuilding. The crystal. Cities that had taken millennia to grow could not be restored overnight. But the human engineers who had arrived on the second wave of ships were already developing plans to help the Zephyrians reconstruct their world. Dr. Helen White had arrived 3 days after the battle, bringing with her a team of xenobiologists and engineers who specialized in working with alien ecosystems. She spent her days studying Zephyrian crystal growing techniques, learning how their ancestors had shaped living rock into the beautiful cities that had been destroyed by Krillian weapons. "It's remarkable," White explained to Cross as they watched. "Zephyrian workers beginning to cultivate new crystal seedlings. Their entire civilization is based on patience and organic growth. These cities weren't built in the traditional sense. They were grown over centuries." The human engineers had adapted quickly to this alien approach to construction. Instead of imposing Earth-based solutions, they worked to understand Zephyrian methods and find ways to accelerate the natural processes. Within a week, they had developed techniques that could reduce crystal growth time from decades to months, while still maintaining the organic beauty that defined Zephyrian architecture. Specialist Rodriguez had established the first interspecies medical center in one of the intact cave systems. Her work treating injured Zephyrians had evolved into a comprehensive program that combined human medical technology with Zephyrian healing techniques. The crystalline beings possessed natural resonance abilities that could accelerate their own healing when properly focused, and Rodriguez was learning to enhance these abilities with Earth-based medical procedures. "They're teaching me as much as I'm teaching them," Rodriguez explained to Cross during one of his visits to the medical center. "Their understanding of harmonic healing is centuries ahead of anything we have on Earth. If we can combine our technologies, we might revolutionize medicine for both species." The emotional healing was proving just as important as the physical reconstruction. Elder Nix Tellen worked closely with Cross to establish counseling programs for Zephyrians who had survived the invasion. Many of the survivors suffered from what humans would recognize as post-traumatic stress, struggling to cope with the violence they had witnessed and the losses they had endured. Chon had become an unexpected source of comfort for many of the younger Zephyrians. The demolitions expert's fierce protective instincts had made her popular with the children who had lost their families during the invasion. She spent her off-duty hours teaching them simple games and helping them process their trauma through play and interaction. "They remind me why we do this," Chon told Cross one evening as they watched a group of young Zephyrians learning to trust again. "Every child who smiles, every family that gets reunited, every life we save makes all the Kyai fighting worthwhile." Turner had been working with Zephyrian technicians to rebuild their communication networks, but his efforts had expanded into something much larger. The collaboration between human and Zephyrian technology was producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The new communication systems combined human encryption techniques with Zephyrian harmonic resonance, creating networks that were both secure and beautiful. Jackson had taken on the task of training Zephyrian volunteers in basic self-defense techniques. The peaceful species had no natural aptitude for violence, but Jackson's patient instruction was helping them develop the confidence to protect themselves and their communities. His lessons focused on awareness and evasion rather than aggressive combat, respecting the Zephyrians' fundamental nature while giving them tools to avoid future victimization. Davis had become something of a legend among the Zephyrian survivors. His defense of the children during the battle was already being incorporated into their oral histories, and many young Zephyrians had begun following him around whenever he visited their communities. The big soldier accepted this attention with characteristic grace, using his reputation to help build trust between the two species. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Hayes arrived with a full diplomatic Mission from Earth. The formal establishment of relations between humanity and the Zephyrian people required careful negotiation. But the foundation of trust that Cross's team had built made the process remarkably smooth. Elder Nick Stellan presented Cross with a crystal sculpture that told the story of their liberation. The artwork was breathtakingly beautiful, its faceted surfaces catching and reflecting light in patterns that conveyed emotions too complex for words. The sculpture would be displayed in Earth's capital as a symbol of the friendship between their peoples. In return, Cross gave the elder a small container of soil from his family's ranch in Montana. The gesture seemed simple, but its meaning was profound. The soil would be planted in the Zephyrians' rebuilt capital as a living symbol of the bond between Earth and Kepler 442 b. The trade agreements that followed were generous to both sides. Earth would provide technological assistance and security guarantees, while the Zephyrians would share their advanced knowledge of crystal engineering and harmonic sciences. More importantly, a mutual defense pact was signed, ensuring that neither world would face future threats alone. Cultural exchange programs were established almost immediately. Young Zephyrians would study at Earth's universities, learning human sciences and philosophy, while human researchers would work alongside Zephyrian masters to understand the ancient arts of crystal cultivation and harmonic healing. As the USS Valiant prepared for departure, Cross found himself reluctant to leave. The past month had been exhausting but deeply rewarding. His team had not only saved an entire species from extinction, they had helped build the foundation for a lasting friendship between two very different civilizations. Elder Nick Stellan came to see them off, accompanied by hundreds of Zephyrians who had gathered to express their gratitude. The formal ceremony was beautiful, with the crystalline beings creating patterns of light and sound that conveyed emotions beyond the reach of any translation device. "You have given us more than our lives," Nick Stellan said to Cross during their final meeting. "You have given us hope for the future and faith that good still exists in the galaxy." The journey back to Earth quiet, each member of the team processing the experiences they had shared. They had faced impossible odds and achieved something that many had thought impossible. More importantly, they had proven that strength without compassion was meaningless, and that the willingness to help others was humanity's greatest weapon. 6 months later, Cross stood before a new class of Terran Expeditionary Force recruits. At the training facility on Luna Base, the young soldiers looked eager but uncertain, unsure what they were committing themselves to when they volunteered for humanity's most elite unit. "We didn't go to Kepler 442b to be heroes," Cross told them, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "We went because someone asked for help, and that's what humans do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. That's not just our duty. That's who we are." The recruits listened intently as Cross described the mission that had already become legendary within Earth's military. But he focused not on the battles they had fought, but on the lives they had saved and the civilization they had helped preserve. Outside the training facility, Earth's deep space monitoring arrays continued their eternal watch. New signals arrived daily from across the galaxy, most of them routine communications or trade requests. But Cross knew that somewhere out there, another desperate Plea might be traveling through the void, carrying the hopes of a species facing extinction. When that call came, the Deathworlders would be ready to answer. The message from Kepler 442b had reached Earth, and Earth had responded with everything that made humanity great. Strength tempered by compassion, technology guided by wisdom, and the absolute conviction that no species should face the darkness alone. The galaxy was a little brighter because of what they had done, and Cross knew that was worth any sacrifice they might be called upon to make.